to Dragons on the Wall, IGN's Game of Thrones show, where we dig into each episode of the final season of Game of Thrones. And guess what? We are in the second to last tonight. We are, of course, going full spoilers into The Bells, which is the name of episode 5 this season. I'm Terri Schwartz, and this episode had me feeling like Daenerys Targaryen because I did a real hard change on this season halfway through this episode. Now, joining me is...
And my name is Joshua Yale, and this episode had me feeling like Jon Snow because I just had a stunned look on my face the whole time.
And I'm Jim Vejvoda. I'm feeling like Varys because I feel like I'm about to get roasted.
Why are you about to get roasted, Jim?
I don't know, because I got hot takes, so maybe I'm also like Drogon. I don't know.
Oh, you're going for two. You're going for two.
So
For
it's
the
a twofer.
record, I gave him that Drogon one.
She
before we
did. She
started.
fed me all my
I'm
lines.
taking full credit for that
That's
one.
right.
So the internet is on fire right now, just
So is
like
King's
King's
Landing.
Landing.
Hey.
Yeah, I was building
there's
up
going
to
to be
it.
a lot of fire jokes tonight, people.
And largely, people seem to be really divided on this episode. It seems like the vocal majority right now, and granted, I haven't spent too much time on Twitter, so this could be a not correct statistic, but it seems like a lot of people are really against this episode. But myself, and we'll get into this here, actually kind of liked it. And the big thing that is kind of divisive is Daenerys' arc in this episode. She ultimately goes full Mad Queen, which we've been talking about for seasons at this point, kind of the build up. Will she make this turn? It finally happened tonight. Let's break it down. What did you guys think about Daenerys ending up being Mad Queen? Joshua, we'll talk with you. And do you think it felt earned, or are you frustrated like a lot of other people are at kind of this course correction for this character?
It's really interesting because I don't like how we got to the point of her becoming the Mad Queen, but the result of her becoming the Mad Queen and what she did and how that affected the other characters and just shook up the state of Game of Thrones made me feel something like really strong, very uncomfortable feeling, but it made me feel something, and it kind of felt like the show was like really interesting, and I was not quite sure what was going to happen for once. But yeah, how we got there and how we meet her in this episode with her. Oh, her hair is like, it's loose and messy everywhere. And
well, who's going to do her hair for her?
Miss Sandy, isn't there to comb her hair or talk sense into her anymore. And it was Jorah the one who fed her meals because she's also gaunt and everything, and she's like, I'm crazy now, so that I just thought that was so like hokey and was not into how they're like, oh, this is Dany now, obviously we showed you how she's been backed into a corner and she lost all her trusted advisors, and there's like literally no other option for her to become this, and it felt forced. I felt like if maybe this was like a full proper season, there would have been some more time to get her there. Because Game of Thrones has always been a show about like moral complexities and people who aren't necessarily all good or all evil, but she just went straight to the dark side. And there's been a lot of complex character work for her in other seasons, but it seems like they just kind of ignored all of that now just to make her the villain for these final 2 episodes.
You said you don't like how he got there, but you do kind of like the fact that she is there. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that the fact that she decided, she took that rest right in the middle of the battle after she pretty much obliterated all of the defenses and all their scorpions and stuff. She kind of just sat there and she looked at the Red Keep, and then she decided, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to make it personal. And when she did that, that's what really like changed the landscape of the show. For the longest time, we thought
Literally.
Yes, literally. The skylines at King's Landing isn't the same anymore. But when we've been constantly thinking that this all had to do with like the Night King, and the Night King was so important, and this and that, whatever. And
or
then,
Cersei, even it was all about Cersei,
yeah,
right?
For sure. I guess we were just kind of waiting for like some meaning to come out of all of this, and some like really poetic arc to blossom out of all this chaos. And the Night King just kind of went down. And then in the next episode, they didn't even like mention him except for the Hound like making a joke about him. So I thought, well, where is the show going now? And turns out all along, maybe Dany was the real villain of the show that they were building. And of course, she has a very sympathetic arc of, she came from a really horrible place and had to do a lot of bad things to get what was hers, what she saw as hers. And that was really compelling. And a lot of people champion her as the hero. People are dressing up as, Mother of Dragons for Halloween and stuff and naming their kids Daenerys and stuff. But now I think ultimately that arc has led to a very, tragic place where she feels she has no other option than to really make a mark on history. And she thinks when people look back on that battle and what she did, I think people she wanted people to fear, because she didn't have the love of the people, right? And so she wanted people to know that she laid waste to that place. And that also sends a message to anyone who would oppose her in Westeros or another part of the world that you do not mess with her, because this will happen to you. And that took, her crossing a lot of lines and burning them down along with a lot of innocent people.
Yeah, a lot to chew on in this. But Jim, I want to hear from you. What did you think?
I actually quite liked the episode, and I actually thought it paid off. It was a logical conclusion to this arc. I never understood why people thought she was going to end up this hero, because I thought it was pretty on the nose early on that she was going to be like an Anakin Skywalker in this story. There are very classical, almost tropey kind of things in Game of Thrones where it's like, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And she basically embraced the Machiavellian kind of maxim of, it's better to be feared than loved. All this kind of stuff that, history has taught us, has warned us about. And she was a young, inexperienced person with an incredible sense of entitlement and essentially 3 weapons of mass destruction. What did we really think was going to happen? Like we saw before, young people, and not just young people, but people, untried people, given that much power and that much might, what it would do to them. We saw it with Joffrey, Ramsay Bolton, all these people. And I never bought that she was going to be this, it wasn't going to be How to Train Your Dragon. It's not Toothless and Hiccup, It's like, this is a person who's the daughter of the Mad King. Now, whether he was nudged there or not by Bran, we'll find out. But I think that it was, I think it was completely kind of in character for her to make that choice, because it's also in character with how despots have behaved throughout history, from Vlad the Impaler, right? He fought a war and he thought he had to do what he had to do, including impaling people for miles. Every bad ruler has done that. They all they think that ends justify the means. So when she's sitting up there saying, future generations will be free of tyrants, yeah, will there be future generations? Because you just killed everybody. But that's also in keeping with how despots and evil rulers have done. They've wiped people's seed from the earth, and just made sure that, the child can't grow up to get revenge, So I thought it was pretty in character. And I didn't actually read it as her being quite crazy at the beginning. Yeah, she had kind of the unblinking stare. I think she was more kind of paranoid. And I think that's why she wasn't eating, because she knew she was right. She knew people were conspiring against her.
And Varys, they don't explicitly say it, but the implication at the beginning, that first scene with Varys, is he is trying to poison her. He's trying to take her down.
He's got his little bird doing his work for him.
Yeah. And I also took it as her, frankly, being devastated that Missandei had died, her closest friend. And, Grey Worm doesn't say too much, but he was never much of an advisor to her. She lost Barristan Selmy. She lost Jorah. She doesn't trust Tyrion. She lost Missandei. She has no one to guide her. I'm with you. I actually, there are parts of the episode that I thought didn't ring completely true. I stand by the best episode of Game of Thrones is the first 20 minutes of the season 6 finale, when it's the build up to Cersei taking down the Septa Baelor, because it's just perfection on every level. But I did really like this episode, and especially the Daenerys twist. Laura Prudhomme, who's our reviewer for Game of Thrones, she's been on previous episodes of Dragons on the Wall. She is currently writing her review and trying to grapple with her thoughts on the episode as we speak. So her take might be a little bit different than ours if we aren't representing it here. But for me, I think part of the reason why it seems like people are taking it as such a bait and switch is because the show itself never took a cold, hard look at Daenerys Targaryen and said, is she a good ruler? It's only been kind of in dribs and drabs this season that the characters are even having that conversation. So you have the combination of the show, because Daenerys has been so far removed from every other character, it wasn't until this season, really, and kind of when like Varys and Tyrion came into her storyline, that we started getting a look at Daenerys from an outsider's perspective. We were always with her, and everyone is the hero of their own story, right? So of course she was the hero of hers through her own eyes. But the show never asked, but what about Marine? She just left it behind. What about Yunkai? What about Astapor? What about the fact that she has just come in as a conqueror and never been a ruler? And these are things that, like, in our preview for Dragons this season, like, we talked about those questions, about this idea of Daenerys maybe not being a great ruler. And I get that, like, for people who haven't been questioning that, who've been saying, this is a character I name my children after, and I don't know, do you get to, like, rename your children if you end up hating
It's
the
Danielle
turns?
now.
Yeah, it's Danielle instead. But I get it why that feels like a burn, or like, what have I been investing my time in the same way that people felt that when Ned Stark died and Robb Stark died. But unlike kind of my frustrations with the Night King, where I was just like, wait, it all just dissolved, it meant nothing. To me, Daenerys absolutely has been on track for this story beat. And the showrunners kind of explained it in the inside the episode as like, well, in the absence of any good advisors to tell her, here's what you should do. And also after these series of betrayals left her feeling, completely vulnerable, and it's personal now, like this might not have happened. I frankly don't think that it could have happened any other way, because her entire experience as a ruler has been through conquering and been through a show of might. And that's exactly what she did here. It just happened to be in a situation that we are really invested in, again, getting those other perspectives.
Well, see, I think in a lot of ways, like, her mindset of how to be a ruler was cemented the minute Khal Drogo poured put the gold crown on Viserys. And she saw that's how you deal with things. But, he was just a barbarian, and he didn't have to actually rule. He just had to conquer. But I want to actually kind of make a point about your earlier comment of, I feel like the show has been kind of laying the groundwork a little bit for sowing the seeds of doubt about her, because we saw when she roasted the Tarleys, Tyrion wasn't exactly 100% on that one either. You could tell that a lot of her advisors have been afraid of her and trying to cross her. And I don't think, even if she had those advisors, she wouldn't have listened. She wanted what she wanted. She was that close to it. It's all she's ever known and wanted was getting there, and it was within reach. She wasn't going to stop.
Wrecked it.
She did.
That's the thing that's so devastating. And the show didn't really do much about kind of the final remnants of wildfire around the city going off. But if you think about it, she did what her father wasn't able to do because Jaime had killed him. He wanted to burn them all. And that's exactly what she did. He wanted to light up King's Landing as flagrant, all these people who he ruled who were turning against him. And he wasn't able to because Jaime killed him. And she did exactly that for all the people that she was supposed to be taking care of. And it's like, it's so Game of Thrones. Like, to me, it feels quite true to the show that these things would happen.
Even just hearing you say that was such a cool, like, callback, like parallel right there. I wish they had put that in the show.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I feel like having her turn so quickly is just, it's not giving her enough credit, and saying that, oh, well, her advisors weren't there, therefore she's now a crazy person. I don't think that gives that character enough credit. And because, yes, everything you said earlier, Jim, definitely true about how she feels entitled to all this stuff, and she's got a short temper. And a lot of those people have been there to keep her in check. But also, she is a character of willpower and of strong decision-making skills. And I just felt like they made her seem like she was just a slave to her inhibitions, and was just like out of control without other people to keep her in check. But which oh gosh, it almost sounds like it's become like a meta commentary of like, telling a woman what to do with her.
But is she more dragon than
is.
human? Frankly, I mean, I think that's a question where, like, a dragon.
Is this about the tail?
No, I feel like the dragon is there as a metaphor, but also like a dragon is just a beast that lays waste, right, to everything. And I think ultimately, like, she wasn't the mother of Shih Tzus. She was the mother of dragons, and it was like it's a very different, like right there that should tell you something. Like she is a force of nature and a force of destruction, and that's what it. There is a reason why villages always wanted to slay the dragon in fairy tales. They weren't necessarily there to be protectors; they were also a threat to civilization that had to be put down.
I love the direction of this episode. I think it's stunning. I believe maybe if we'd been able to see The Long Night, that also would have been a beautiful episode. But both were directed by Mikhail Sapochnik, who also directed The Battle of the Bastards. And I love the way he shot this episode, even though I have some quibbles. And one thing that I really like about it is that when Daenerys comes and flies in on Drogon, in previous episodes, we've been getting close up to her, right? Where we're able to be in tune with Daenerys because we can see her face. We can maybe understand the emotion she's going through. But for the bulk of this episode, every time we see her is only this like wide shot of Drogon. And it totally does what you're saying, where she is synonymous with the dragon. She is no longer a human person, but she is like a force of destruction. I thought that came across really well.
I thought there was a lot of like the apocalyptic imagery in this episode was really breathtaking at times. And I think, there were, I feel like a lot of clear sort of inspirations to that, whether it was World War II imagery, like she basically comes in like a dive bomber.
Absolutely,
at the beginning. It was like the bombing of Dresden. There was even some Hiroshima kind of feeling to it. There was some Pompeii in there at some point. There was even like some 9/11 kind of type imagery. Like there was everything that was apocalyptic in sort of the human experience of war and why it's horrible and why it shouldn't happen. It takes out that like rah, 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 go get them, good guys, bad guys kind of narrative that human beings fall into in their march up to war. And then like when you're actually on the ground, I haven't been to war, I want to know, but like they say, like once you're on the ground, like you just want to survive.
And I think that probably was very intentional. We know for Battle of the Bastards, Miguel went back and looked at like specific battles for kind of his inspiration in the military strategy. So I'm sure that was very intentional. And I think something the show has been lacking, especially this season, is that like human element. Like whenever we cut to King's Landing, it's like empty. It's like, well, who are the people we're fighting for? And I think it was a smart decision. Jon had probably less screen time this episode than that mother and her daughter who we kept cutting back to. And I think it really helps bring you into it where it's not just our heroes, right? It's everyone else. And they're just, even though many of them didn't die, they're just as susceptible as others are. But Joshua, I did want to bring up the thing you kind of said about, the way that they're kind of characterizing Daenerys. One thing that Vera said in the last episode and this episode that kind of bothered me, because it feels like it's a take on like power and feminism or whatever, but he kept saying like men write history when he's talking about why Jon needs to be on the Iron Throne, and that just kind of rung false to me. And I hope that's not a message that the showrunners are trying to say. I hope that like when it comes around, it's Sansa or something like that who ends up sitting on the Iron Throne, someone who is incredibly powerful. But the show keeps kind of defaulting to these medieval archetypes that I think are a disservice to like the storytelling it's told, especially with its women. And it felt like that was kind of something that you were thinking about as well. Maybe not that specific line in general, but like the way that Daenerys is now just like very emotional and evil, like a switch was flipped.
Right. When he said like men, write history, I was like, was he talking about like literally men, as in like only men can do this job? And for a person as wise as Varys, he's proven to be one of the smartest characters on the show. I was like, is this really coming out of his mouth? Does he mean like literally men, or does he mean just like people write history? Like I was a little confused by that line, because I was like, surely not, because the women are the characters who have long made history on this show. Like who's the sitting queen, or who was the sitting queen? Cersei, right? And like Marjorie was a huge power player, the Queen of Thorns. Like there were so many female characters who made Game of Thrones what it was. And it did seem a little ignorant of him to be like, men write the history.
After everything on this show, though,
yeah.
is a character that's sexist is like, I mean, that's like, it does seem in fitting with sort of the realm of these, Middle Ages characters that were all about, I can spell it, I can't say it, progenitor or whatever, where it was about the right of who could come to the throne. I actually read a really interesting piece last week, and forgive me, the outlet that wrote it, but it was all about kind of shooting down the idea that only men could. It's really about who is the firstborn. So even if it was a daughter, the firstborn child of the firstborn, they would get the throne. So it was actually like I think Varys in a way is.
Just
I
rain
think
falls for me to hear it from him.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
But I wondered, was he trying to, at that point when he saw that Jon was not going to break, was he just trying to appeal to like his male ego at that point? Like, was he just trying to press any button he could to get this guy to just do what I'm asking you to do? I mean, I feel like I never quite knew enough about what Varys thought of women to have like a greater sense of where he stood with that stuff. But yeah, I guess even a guy without balls can still be sexist.
I don't know. It just like, I don't know. We'll see where things end up falling from there. Obviously, I mean, we could spend another many hours talking about the Mad Queen turn. I think that is going to end up being one of the most compelling arcs and surprising twists for the show. So surely in the final episode, we'll discuss it more. But,
Can I add one more thing onto
please.
it? It's because we were talking about this a little bit earlier, right after the episode ended, was just that, a lot of people have seen Dany as a hero of fantasy, but by the end of Game of Thrones, will she be on the list of like top fantasy villains alongside like Sauron and like Voldemort and,
Well, I
She's
think
more of a Walter
Targaryen?
White, like maybe not as richly drawn as Breaking Bad did with its anti-hero, but I think her kind of de-evolution.
Yeah,
goes more like
Anakin
that.
Skywalker, Michael Corleone. Like there is a long kind of tradition of the anti-hero, the fallen character. I mean, just to go back to like the apocalyptic imagery, there was a lot of like, it's like out of the book of Revelations, like dragons and everything and burning the earth down. And, there's, I think there was a lot of stuff there with Dany that ultimately maybe one of the morals of this story is be careful who you worship, be careful who you idolize, be careful who you build up and give power to, because maybe they're not what you think. Take time and actually get to know them. And I think we could talk about why Jon, it took an entire city getting burned down for him to finally take the blinders off. I mean, he's dumb as a bag of hammers at this point. So
It was our sister site, Mashable, Angie Han, their, I believe, deputy editor is her title, had the funniest tweet out of one of the earlier episodes where she was like, I don't care what John's 23andMe says, he is for sure a Stark because he makes some of the dumbest decisions on this show, which I totally believe and buy and stand behind. But yeah, we could talk about the Mad Queen turn, for many more episodes, and I'm sure we will in the next one. But I do want to move on. There were a lot of deaths in this episode. We were talking about not having enough in the Battle of Winterfell. We had like 7 main character deaths plus all of King's Landing in this episode. So let's talk through the deaths. Do you think that they got a fitting send-off, or do you think it was lame for each of these characters? Let's start with Cersei Lannister, who finally just couldn't make it out alive in this last episode. Or I guess, do you guys think she's actually dead?
Yeah, she's dead.
A lot of people were like, did she somehow survive? Did she and Jaime survive? I think she is dead.
Yeah, they're dead. They're not in like a pocket like that. And they'll like.
I mean, it
claw their
could
way
take them
out.
days to die though if they were buried under rubble. That has happened.
One way or another, I think they're dead.
Let's assume
personally.
they're dead.
Yeah.
Unless there's a big twist coming next episode. No, I think they're dead. I will first say that I was not hoping, but I was expecting a lot of death this episode, which is why I wore all blacks, my funeral garb. If you're an audio only listener, I'm wearing a black button up and a black blazer, and I look so good. But
Heck yeah.
but yeah, so Cersei, she's actually one of my favorite characters, and I thought this season has like done her dirty and just giving her that sort of one-dimensional, I'm really bad and I'm going to do bad things, and she's gotten very little screen time and is just made to be just someone who's like an obstacle for other characters to get over, and hasn't really explored what like being this ruler with her back against the wall has been like. And I thought, but looking at her arc as a
I
whole.
agree, for the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we
I
go.
got your back. I agree.
Just much like they've done Dany wrong and made her like one-dimensional in these past couple episodes. I feel like same things happened to Cersei. But as far as like how she went, I thought it was incredible how she has become the villain of the show. No, even if you like empathize with her and look at her complexities, she's bad, right? As I think Jamie said, like they're creatures of hate, essentially. Yet, as she was dying, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her, of her making it all about her children. She's like, don't let me die, so I want my baby, our baby to survive. Like that was just, it was so humanizing and so true to her character. And all of the horrible things she's done, most things usually have been for her children and for the Lannister line. So I thought that was so powerful because I think when I dreamed of the Battle of King's Landing, for many, many years and how will this all shake out, it was kind of like you were saying, Jim, of just like, yeah, it's going to be this awesome battle. They're going to assault it with dragons and Dothraki and Unsullied and all the favorite characters are going to get in there and kill who they're supposed to kill, and it's going to be great. But as it was happening, because of Dany's turn, I felt sorry for everyone in King's Landing, and especially for Cersei, who, ultimately just wanted to, had this like really strong mother's instinct and wanted to do what she could to defend her own. And I just, as she was dying, I wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, you're getting what you deserve. I was thinking, man, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of rhymes with the mother trying to protect her child that Arya gets kind of entangled with, the way Catelyn Stark looked out for her children. So we've seen this kind of before in the show, and I thought it was really, that was one of the moments that kind of shook me in the show, is like just her pleading with her brother, like, I don't want to die like this. I don't want to, our baby, all this kind of stuff. And I thought that was incredibly wrenching moment, and the fact that you felt sympathy for them. But it also reminded me of, this has been an end of the world story for a long time, and this was the end of their world. And there are many ways for a world to end. It doesn't have to be just White Walkers. It can be your enemies killing off your family line and destroying your home. And like it was nice that the show asked us to have empathy for people who have shown so little of it themselves to others. So I thought it was one of the stronger scenes in a while on that show.
I am with you. I think that the show, especially season 8, has done Cersei a complete disservice for a character who they have spent so much time and energy developing to give her like what has to be one of the smallest amounts of screen time for any main character. And I think that is probably why some people haven't, loved the fact that she kind of got this emotional end, because she was very one-dimensional for the rest of the season. But I think when looking at Cersei as a whole, I did really like this ending for her. I'm glad, as cathartic as it would have been for Arya to go and kill her. And she was so close. She was like steps away. If only she'd known. I did like the way they went out, and it reminds me of one of the most divisive scenes in Game of Thrones history, when Jaime and raped Cersei in front of Joffrey, but his line to her is like, "Gods, you're a hateful woman. Like, what made me have to love such a hateful woman?" And I think that was them until the end, right? Them coming back together. And I do think, like, I'm glad that they didn't get out of it one more time.
They literally went from womb to tomb together.
But like, when they show up and it's like, there's no escape at that point, and there shouldn't be. Like, Cersei deserves to die. She's done horrible things to horrible people, but the fact that they made us feel for her at the very end, I thought that worked. But what a good transition to Jaime. What did you think about his death with her in the arms of the woman he loved?
Wow. So that actually is a throwback to a line that Jaime, I think it was like season 4 or episode 2. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
That's very specific to be just like
or
pulling
season. No, I'm sorry, season 5, episode 4. Season 4, episode 2 is Bran's vision. Anyways, Jaime had said to Bronn, they were talking about how do you want to die, and he said, I would like to die in the arms of the woman I love. And we actually thought that was going to be with Brienne because they went into battle in the Battle of Winterfell together and were fighting side by side. And I was like, oh wow, is he going to die like with her holding him? And it turns out, as we saw, like he left her. Like he had like a happy ending. Like that could have been a like he could have stayed up in the north, but he's just addicted to Cersei. They're two of the same, and he couldn't help but go down to her. And be with her for what I think he knew was going to be her end. I think he wanted to be there with her.
I think Brienne knew too that if he left, he was never coming back.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think he thought, I think he saw her, she was her clock was ticking, like she was going to expire. He knew that probably, even if he tried to have a happy ending with Brienne, he's a Lannister, and at the end of the day, someone would come looking for revenge. And so I think he thought, if I'm going to go, I want it to be with her. And he actually looked like he took received fatal wounds during his fight with Euron, but those didn't seem to be a factor in the end. So, like, I thought he wasn't gonna make it to her or something.
That's a very non-Game of Thrones thing. Like, how does anyone walk away with that? But anyway.
I mean,
Arya did, I guess, a couple seasons ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
But anyways, but yeah,
he made it, right?
For them to, do the throwback death where he's, oh yes, they died in each other's arms, and he spent his last moments just, making the woman he loved feel calm and at peace, and not worrying about what was going to happen. I thought that was a really touching moment for a brother and a sister who, shtup each other. And one of the weirdest things that we're like completely invested in on this show, but there you go.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Well, one of the things I liked about Jaime's death scene was that I don't know if it would have worked quite as well if he didn't get that final moment with Tyrion either, because that was very, very moving.
Definitely one of the best
both
scenes
knew
in the episode, for sure.
One or both of us are going to die,
Yeah.
and I'm saying goodbye to you, and that I love you, and thank you for being there for me when everyone else made my life hell. So I think that definitely kind of set the tone for what that scene with Jaime's final scene was going to be. In terms of how it actually happened, I had kind of long suspected it was going to be some kind of twisted kind of take on Romeo and Juliet of them dying together, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But I didn't think they would get caved in together. I thought they would do poison, or he would kill her and it would murder suicide, something like that. So the fact that they get kind of, I know I was being cheeky, but they literally did go from womb to tomb together is kind of, I guess, fitting in a way. And that he was never going to escape being the Kingslayer. Right up to his last moments when he's fighting Euron, it's again about the Kingslayer. Like, so he was never gonna escape that. Even if he did run off with Brienne, he was somebody would show up at his door. He's like an old gunfighter who's always gonna, like the guy who shot Jesse James. It's gonna track you forever. So
yeah, I thought this all tracked with his character, though I will say, and I talked about this a little bit on our watch party post show that we did as well. The fact that this is how he ended up with Cersei, which I do think it works for their characters, it has this emotional payoff. I wish that they hadn't felt the need to consummate his relationship with Brienne, because I really think that it undervalues, in retrospect, like his decision to go back to Cersei, that he is her one true love. Like, I don't think Brienne as a character, sure, like she should get her kicks in, whatever, but I think that she didn't need to no longer be a virgin to have sex, to have this experience with him. If it was, she was almost going to be kind of like disrespected by him in the end. And I think the consummation of their feelings of respect and love, if it is love between Jaime and Brienne, could have just been the knighting scene. That could have been it. And so I was kind of, I don't know, it rang a little false to me that he would do that and then still choose to leave and go back to Cersei.
Do you think they're setting up her having his kid?
I
hope.
Think of that.
I kind of hope not. Like, I feel like there are various things that characters don't need. Like, she can just be a lady knight. She doesn't need to be a mother.
But I was just wondering if there was something about like the whole thing
The
about
seed
houses.
is strong.
Well, no, but the different houses having like one left of each one, and like because I don't think Tyrion's gonna make it out, but we'll probably get to predictions.
We'll see. Yeah,
What
we'll
if Brienne carries on the Lannister legacy? by
But they
having
wouldn't
his
be
kid.
married, so it would be a bastard anyway.
But still,
Well, it's worked out okay for a few of them on the
for
show.
Yeah, that's
Gendry,
true.
I mean,
Yeah. But I will say, like, I liked that it wasn't Jaime killing Cersei. I liked that they did end up together. He got that. There were a lot of callbacks in this episode to previous episodes, and this was dying in the arms of the woman that he loved. Though I do wonder how, in a show where people travel so fast, how did Jaime get such a short distance of time from sundown to sunup? By the laws of this show, he should have been like, they should have already escaped by then. I was like, how did he just get up to the city? They were so close. But anyway, that is
maybe they
an
have some
aside.
infinity stone, or they have access to the quantum realm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think so,
That's-
but he got lost along the way. Anyway, we have quite a few more to go, but another character I do want to give a good amount of time to is Sandor Clegane, the Hound. We can kind of compound this with talking about the Mountain and his death as well. But what do you guys think about the way that he finally went out in a huge ball of fire, fighting his brother like he's always
It was
wanted?
hella cool.
Holy crap! This was the most epic brawl in all of Game of Thrones history. I mean, sure, maybe you could maybe say the Mountain versus the Viper was maybe the coolest, with
That
all
probably
his,
is
Nice
the coolest
callback
fight.
to that
Yeah.
one here, though.
of his Darth Maul moves and everything. But yeah, with the eyeball squishing.
The Mountain only has one move, you guys.
Yeah.
That's
The
his
killing
finishing
blow.
stroke,
I
okay?
don't know. It's like his,
He's
yeah.
just Kratos.
But as far as like epic goes, of the King's Landing's like crumbling to the ground. There's dragons flying overhead. The city's on fire in the background. Every time their swords clash against each other, this like shockwave comes out. Every time the Mountain misses, it goes like ka-chunk into like the stone
Right.
pillars or the sword or the stairs. It was just the most like awesome like back and forth, like two titans of the Game of Thrones world, two of like the most like unbeatable fighters just trying to beat the crap out of each other. And then one of them happens to be a zombie, so it's like it's completely one-sided. And then yeah, Sandor sort of has to do that desperation move of dagger through the face, which barely phases the guy. Does
Yeah.
get him to let go
Yeah.
of his eyeballs, which helped. But yeah, and then they went out by he tackles him over the edge, and they go into the fire of dragon fire that's smoldering at the bottom of,
I just
of
loved
King's
that.
Landing.
Yeah.
And that's such a perfect ending for him, who has just feared the fire, and his brother did that to him, so he brings his brother to the fire to end it all.
Yeah, I thought it was a just magnificent duel, and that it was the imagery in that scene, like Benioff, the showrunner David Benioff, described it as apocalyptic, like a beautiful apocalyptic imagery, and it really is. It was kind of like if you could imagine like the Death Star battle at the end of Return of the Jedi, when the Death Star is blowing up and it's Luke and Vader, and then so there's that personal familial connection there, so you're invested in it, and then mashed up with Lord of the Rings, and like they're at Mount Doom and everything. It was like a perfect geek fantasy of like, this is how you want badasses to go out, and then just even but again, it was like coming down to like that emotional thing. If you didn't care about the Hound and him saying goodbye to Arya, making sure the one last good thing he did in this world was make sure that this kid didn't die, like he earned his ending in that way, I thought. And the Mountain was just a complete force of nature at that point, so it made sense that the elements ultimately
I
had
love
to
that
take
we
him
saw
out.
what he looked like too. He was
Yeah.
a gross zombie.
Yeah.
What did you call him, Jim? You said he looked like
He looked like Darth Vader when he
Yes.
got
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
he kind of
helmet
looked like,
removed,
well, like when they, again, like the end of Return of the Jedi, when he takes off the helmet. So I thought there was some like geeky, whether they were intentional or not, I think they're so in our
Oh,
DNA.
you mean the directors of the next Star Wars trilogy were
Oh,
might have been
yeah.
thinking about Star Wars?
Yeah,
Previously.
so I thought a lot of it, I just thought it was a great fight. I've been hearing people talk about Cleganebowl for years, and
Maester Hype Man.
yeah. And Clyburn getting
Effing
taken out.
Yeah.
Clyburn got taken out in just a shove. That was it.
That was
Yeah.
the next one on our list too. Before we get to him, I do want to say like the one thing I didn't love about this is that I felt like they didn't need to keep cutting back to Arya in the streets during it. Like I felt like that was a weird parallel to be drawing. when
Maybe
we
it
could
was
have just
so we knew that she wouldn't just show up.
Well, it like it
11th
very
hour.
much was trying to draw this parallel between these two characters, and kind of the flip side of that for me is I really did like that he said, like, don't be me, don't come down this path of being me. And they did have this connection. And again, she was so close. She could have just gone and killed Cersei, but that would have meant her death. And I don't necessarily know what she has to live for, but clearly that was the choice that was made. I'm with you guys. I think for all that I have talked about Cleganebowl, especially to you guys in the past, and it's mostly because I have an investment in this really funny YouTube video from 2015 called Cleganebowl Hype, and it's hilarious, and please watch it. It's the most internet thing ever. I personally have not been like, oh my God, I need this to happen before the end, or like my Game of Thrones experience is ruined. But I liked all the marks that it checked. And also liked how Qyburn's death was a part of it, which was the most literal throwaway scene for such an annoying character who became so big but really was so small. I was like, yes, this is the perfect death for
He
Qyburn.
literally got squashed like an insect.
Yeah.
He got flicked, you know?
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was the most realistic injury of all of them, because like for some of the other characters, they would have gotten back up and kept going.
Yeah.
And his was like, nope, that'll kill you.
That's done. Your
It was
brain's
really
done.
funny how the mountain would like seem to be. I don't know if he was like reprogrammed or something, but he always had to. Why is that funny?
They rebooted him. I don't know, yeah, because he is
Reprogrammed,
like
I don't
the
know.
Terminator.
Well, yeah, I don't know what Qyburn did to him that he followed all of his commands and Cersei's commands to the letter, but the hatred for his brother overrode that, and he pushed him out of the way, and his head popped open.
So good. And then we also had Euron, who died, who I actually didn't like this death, because Euron, like Qyburn, does not deserve a dramatic fight with Jaime Lannister. He deserves to die like Harry Strickland did, where he's like trampled or like gets a stake through the back or whatever. I like really thought, kind of like the Dorne storyline, Euron has been such a waste in the show, so one-dimensional. Like I like.
Wait, who is Harry Strickland again?
He was the head of the Golden Company.
That's his
guy.
name, Harry Strickland?
Yes, it
Sounds like
is.
a middle manager at an insurance
He
firm.
and Carl Tanner are the most non-Game of Thrones
My
Thrones
God.
names in the show.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I really think that they did a very one-dimensional job with a character who could have been much more interesting. And so, yeah, I was annoyed. I was like, why do you get so much time at the end? Why do you get a good fight? Couldn't you have like washed up on a different shore? But I don't know. Did you guys feel differently about Euron?
I've never actually liked Euron. I thought he was the biggest mustache twirler on the show.
Agreed.
I mean, he was, you know, so dastardly with a capital D. You know, the biggest kind of most arch villain we've had since Ramsay Bolton. I thought. I felt like it was just kind of running out the clock a little bit on Jaime. Like they needed somehow for him to be impaired in some way so that they couldn't get their happy ending. I don't know. Screw Euron. I'm glad he's gone.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. He was just so annoying, and the way he went out was just like I got killed by Jaime Lannister, and it's like, and we didn't even get to see his death. So I know there will be people who are like, oh, Euron's still alive. Like
No,
But
don't
no,
wish,
his
don't
eyes,
wish
I
that
could
into
see
the
the light
world.
kind of leave his
he
eyes
like
a little
crawls
bit.
into the boat, the little dinghy, that was meant
Ugh.
for them.
No. No
gets
justice
away.
for Euron. Euron, you die. Die. I'm sorry. I'm as bloodthirsty as Daenerys. That's why I chose her. And lastly, the first death in the episode, Varys, who I was actually very surprised he kind of went out this way with zero tact. But kind of his last hurrah, I do appreciate he was trying to poison Daenerys. And I would say of anything, like I'm like waiting for Reddit to like break down the whole scene of like his message he burned and put away and like the rings he dropped in, and is there more to it? Does he have more to his master plan? And I know we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but I'm curious, what did you guys think of how Varys went out?
Varys is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, you're not doing so hot. You had Littlefinger, you had Cersei, you had
know.
Varys.
Varys was.
He's not even gonna watch next week. It's all done.
It's over for Joshua.
As far as I'm concerned, the show's over. Varys is gone. No, I actually do think there's more to his plan, which we'll get to when we do our predictions in a little bit. But as far as just the character of Varys and him meeting his end in this episode is actually hugely significant in an episode with hugely significant other things also happening, because he and Littlefinger, I always saw as the two people who were playing the Game of Thrones. For all the power they had, the likes of Cersei and Dany and Jon and such, they were all like pieces on the board, and they were the ones manipulating the events by poisoning people or giving power to people or helping people placing people, helping like Tyrion get away after he killed his father. Like they were always there when there was a change of power. They were always, making it happen and playing people against each other and doing all these things. So when Littlefinger died, I thought like, oh wow, it's kind of like it's Varys's, it's free reign to kind of do what he wants, and he can sort of manipulate the game unopposed, which I thought was very interesting. But now that Varys is gone, it's like he just kind of made his last moves, I think, before death, and then met his end. And, he was telling Tyrion, I hope I was wrong, but I think what he was saying was like, I'm right. Right.
Like, you're next, bro. Like,
yeah. Like, this isn't going well. Like, me, like the guy who knows everything, like, saw this coming and tried to stop it. And so now it's kind of
like
on
Jon
you.
Snow.
We were joking that what if his last message that, was the one that he hid actually just said, I was right. And it's just like he's waiting for Tyrion to go and find it.
Yeah, I think I thought it was a really effective scene. I thought it was very touching and moving and set the tone, that sort of bleak, oh God, this is it, like kind of tone that the whole episode had of like kind of a hopelessness and a sort of a just grim resignation that forces are now in motion that cannot be stopped. And for all your wheeling and dealing, for all your political savvy, that doesn't mean anything if you can't control something that is uncontrollable. Like nature will take its course, and Daenerys is a force of nature. She literally has a dragon, a beast that is one of the elements,
Speaking of the dragon, wasn't that a cool reveal?
Oh,
when out of
that
the
was
darkness,
so cool.
after she says
Well, when
Dracarys.
Drogon didn't immediately do it, I kept wanting there to be something more to there
Who's
was
gonna eat him or
well,
something?
no, that there was the story. There's been so much mystery and so much speculation about Varys because so little is known. And like the one bit that we do know was kind of how he became a eunuch, and when he was cut, that there was this like wizard he heard the voice in the flames, and like that just stuck with him. It's still in his dreams, and so I was like, Maybe there'll be some connection there that like Drogon won't. Oh no, okay, he's dead. All right,
At the
that's
last
it.
second,
Yeah,
he just goes on a monologue that like,
okay,
wait,
yeah.
one more thing. As you've heard in the books that you've all read.
Yeah.
No.
I also thought that the that Varys had it set the tone also for like having sympathy for people who can be very unsympathetic at times. Because it's easy to forget like that he does in his mind feels like he has the good of the realm at heart. And I also liked a little the touch of him putting his jewelry away. It reminded me of Donnie Brasco, this gangster movie with Pacino and Johnny Depp, where at the end, spoiler for a 20-year-old movie, but Pacino's got sent for because he knows he's going to get whacked. In reality, he doesn't actually die, his character, but he puts away his jewelry because he's got to leave something behind for people. And like, I thought that was like a nice little touch. Like this guy knows like, I'm going to put my good stuff away because I'm about to get toasted. Yeah.
Well, this is the last time we can do this because next week's episode is the final episode of Game of Thrones until the prequels. So, with that, let us get into our finale predictions. This is one last 80-minute episode. What do we think is going to happen? Joshua, you go first.
Me first?
You're on the spot. Start at the beginning,
Okay.
beat by beat.
So I think that Varys, we saw him writing those letters. I know we saw him burn one, but I think he got some other ones out to the right people, like the leaders of the other 7 kingdoms and people, whoever, the right parties who need to know.
Who's even left at this point is my
The
question.
Prince of Dorne
Yeah.
Arya.
out there.
I mean, not Arya, the Greyjoy lady.
Yara,
Arya, Yara.
Yara.
But anyway, so that those get to where they need to, and the information on those is, of course, that Jon is the true heir. We saw Arya on the ground, right, and she experienced the burning of King's Landing and saw the horror that Dany is capable of firsthand, right? So she is now probably gunning to kill Dany. Who knows? She might.
Does she deserve both Dany and the Night King?
I don't know.
I don't know.
She's
Yeah,
good at
sure,
it.
sure.
She's good at it. If anyone could do it, it could be her, but she's definitely going to like be opposing her. Jon, similarly, was on the ground. He saw when Dany decided to go and start destroying everything, then that gave essentially all the soldiers, they said, oh, that's our cue that we can rape and pillage and just kill everything we want. So I think that turned Jon against her. As Dany said that, like, oh, this is a victory for Sansa, turning like Varys against me. So we already know Sansa is against her. So now all the Starks are aligned against Dany, right? So I think it's going to be Team Stark going against her to bring her down.
But here's my thing. Here's my question on that, because I also, like, that's my instinct. But what we were talking about earlier with the Mad Queen, you know, she has shown her might. Like, what could they possibly do to defeat her? She has a dragon still. Like, they don't
have
have
a theory.
scorpions. Yeah, okay. Well, Jim, what a great segment for you to tell us your theory for the finale.
Okay, I think, yes, it will be Team Stark to a degree because Jon brought this trouble to their doorstep. Yes, they needed Dany and her dragons to fight the White Walkers, I guess, to a point. What they really needed was Dragonglass and a spry little sister. But ultimately, I think Jon, I think Arya asking him, is it true you died and came back? What if she kills Jon, or he says, you have to do this? She takes his face to get close to Daenerys and kills her that way. Or I also think Daenerys thinks she's going to be able to execute Jon. She marches him out in front of Drogon's sister, Karis, lights him up, nothing. Maybe his clothes are burned, but he's fine.
Or Drogon just doesn't do it because
Yeah.
he seems to respond to both Targaryens.
Yeah, something like that, where somehow like that would be the ultimate kind of like, God, I can't defeat this guy, and proving to everybody like, we can do this. I also think he's gonna stay true to his word of like not wanting to be king. And frankly, I thought in this episode he kind of proved that he shouldn't be king because it didn't
Such a
have to get
dummy.
that. He's an idiot. I think he's
Top
going to go
dummy,
back
peak
off
dummy.
to the wildlings up north. I think ultimately there will be no Iron Throne and no like one ruler. I think everyone will have to learn how to work together. I think Sansa will be the queen in the north. Arya or Brienne will be her hand. And Jon will just go off with the wildlings, because I don't think ultimately he might have some good qualities to be king, but I think his naivete and his ability to put blinders on got a lot of people killed.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the things that have been said in the show, like Daenerys saying she wants to break the wheel or be the last tyrant, frankly, to me, it's impossible. And one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, it's two trilogies. It's called The Wayfarer Redemption by Sarah Douglas. She's this Australian author. And kind of spoilers for this, but like basically the first trilogy is about, this fight against evil, right? And like pretty straightforward, like this traditional hero, whatever, they defeat the evil. And the next trilogy takes place 30 years later with the kids of the other ones. And everything's gone to hell. And it's like, it's subverting this idea of, just because you defeat the evil doesn't mean that everything's going to be fine. It goes back to what George R. R. Martin has said about, the Lord of the Rings being an inspiration, in this idea of, when Aragorn defeated Sauron, that was it. And like, what about the orcs? What about the taxes and all these things? And so even when we're talking about like, oh, well, what'll they do about Daenerys? Who will rule, whatever? Like, there's definitely not going to be a tidy ending. It's not going to be as simple as this person sits on the Iron Throne or whatever, version of that there ends up being, and there is peace forever. And if the show does go that route, which I'm 100% confident that the books won't, but if the show does go that route, I think that will be a flagrant disregard of what this entire series is out to accomplish. And so with that in mind, that's not a prediction, that's just kind of a commentary on it. I do, number one, my hope is that Bran does anything, because he has been the biggest wet blanket this season. He went into crows when he could have done anything helpful, and just didn't. He just talked to people about some stuff. I'm curious and hopeful that his conversation with Tyrion comes back into play, where Tyrion sat down with him and he was like, "Tell me your story," and Bran is like, "It's long and kind of weird," and he's like, "Whatever, we have time." And I hope that ends up being useful. And yeah, I hope that it doesn't end up being kind of the straight up clash that this episode ended up being. I want it to be messy. I don't necessarily need there to be someone on the Iron Throne, though. If I was to predict someone, it would be Sansa, because she is the smartest, least crazy person of everyone still alive at this point. But I want it to be messy. I don't want it to have a tidy ending. I want it to be true to Ramsay Bolton saying, if you think this story has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. I just want it to be done in a way that's true to the spirit of the show and not feel cheap.
I think you make a good point about how it, like, for example, the current show started when Robert had taken rule, right? And it was taken away from him, from people conspiring against him, and it changed hands a couple times over the course of just years of the show. Before that, he had taken it from the Targaryens, right? So just because someone takes the throne, as we've seen throughout the show, what does that even mean? That's not necessarily a victory, right? Like, look what happened to Cersei. So I think what would need to happen to make the victory stick is a time jump. Somebody takes the throne. My money, Sansa is a good bet, but I actually think Tyrion would probably make the best ruler because I think he's the smartest character and knows what's up. And he's certainly not going to stand with Dany because Dany sacked, burned the city and killed his brother and sister, who he loved despite their differences.
And he tried to undermine her in a way that wouldn't get a bunch of people killed in this episode too. I think he's learned from the worst of them, how to hopefully be the best of them.
I mean, why would she want to keep Tyrion around at this point?
Are you kidding me? She doesn't want to keep any of them from around. I think she's going to torch them all the second she can. She already said Jon had betrayed her, that Tyrion betrayed her. She killed Varys. Sansa, she says, is against her. I think everyone is an enemy at this point, except Grey Worm.
Yeah, so I think they're going to have to team up to take Dany down, but I definitely think that Tyrion has what it takes to be a good ruler. Although, again, I wouldn't be surprised with Sansa, but I do want to see a time jump so I can see that, this ruler, this like stuck, and they were a good thing for the realm, and that whatever Varys' plan was, it will be to have put that person on the throne. And I know Varys was pulling for Jon at the time, but of his death. But I think that Jon will not be a good ruler. I think that he served his purpose, which was to help. Well, he did not bring down the Night King personally, but that was sort of his mission, was to help make that happen, and he did. I don't think it's his destiny to rule. So I see him like maybe going the Frodo route of like going off into the distance or something, or sacrificing himself. But I don't see him making it out alive. I definitely don't see Dany making it out alive either. If I'm doing like a ruler and some big deaths, that's what it is.
Yeah. I stand by my theory that I've been saying all season, is that Jon was brought back for a reason, and once he accomplishes that reason, he will die. Not necessarily the happy Frodo version of going to the Grey Havens, but like just, that will be it. Kind of like with Beric, where his purpose seemingly was to get Arya to the Night King to destroy that, and once that happened, he died. But I do think that there could be a time jump. Like, even if we're looking at, I briefly watched the promo for next week's episode, but it looked like snow had come to King's Landing, which we saw some flurries before, but it didn't seem like winter had fully set in, at all this season whenever we've checked in. And so I wonder if there is going to be some kind of time jump in the next episode to justify why there is that snow.
I don't think it'll be too grand of a time jump. I think if
a couple
anything,
months, yeah.
I mean, I feel like at this point, the people are moving faster than weather systems. But I think Jon, he could end up the king in the further north, like among the wildlings, and maybe ultimately these kingdoms have to learn how to work together. And somebody like Tyrion could help be like a great ambassador in between these kingdoms, since he ends up knowing everybody. He's had adventures kind of almost everywhere at this point. And I think Sansa will stay at Winterfell, and then at the end of the day, I think Jon can still serve a purpose, but it's not to rule everybody. I think his purpose, he was a unifier, and I think there's a way he can still help bring unity, but it doesn't have to be necessarily in the kiss the ring kind of function. He can help lead the wildlings and keep this force that had been at least a threat, a perceived threat to them for years, an ally, a friend.
Yeah. Well, by the time this posts, we will have about 6 days and 18 hours left to find out what will actually happen in
George
the
R. R. Martin
final.
will have written 8 words.
8 words. Yeah, so the next week, that is the last week of Game of Thrones, but don't worry, that won't be the last week of Dragons on the Wall. We will be back with another episode as we react to the series finale next week, and we also will be back the week after that with one breakdown of this series as a whole, and maybe we'll have some special cameos. Who knows? You'll have to check in and find out. But for plenty more on Game of Thrones, we will have you covered this week. We will have plenty of coverage on IGN.com. Make sure to check out Laura Prudhom's review of the episode, which should be live by the time you read this. If you want more Game of Thrones discussion fun time, you can tune into our weekly live IGN Watch Party pre- and post shows on any platform you like to watch IGN. We also have an excellent, very fun video of the Game of Thrones cast responding to IGN comments. Part 2, you guys liked the first one so much that we figured we'd use all the leftover ones and put another video together. Speaking of comments, we love hearing your thoughts, so be sure to weigh in on this week's topics on IGN.com in the comments. And if you love us too, then be sure to follow and subscribe to IGN for more Game of Thrones. We'll see you next week.